You know that sound, right? You're walking down the street trying to listen to something, and then bam!
Oh, yeah.
The jackhammers, the endless beeping of a truck backing up.
The grinding.
It's just this chaotic landscape of cranes, concrete mixers,
Right.
dust everywhere. It feels like every city is just perpetually under construction.
It really does. It's kind of the soundtrack of modern life, isn't it? But it's also a huge visual reminder of a massive, massive industry.
Right.
I mean, it's arguably the single biggest physical shaper of our reality.
Exactly. And usually I just, I walk faster. I try to get away from the noise. But today we're doing the opposite. We're going to stop.
We're putting on our hard hats, metaphorically.
We are walking right into that chaos.
Yeah.
Because we've got a really fascinating set of slides today. It's a presentation titled Unit 102.2.1 from a lecturer named James Rix.
Right. And that title, it might sound a little dry, like a course code from a university catalog or something. But the content is actually, it's a foundational look at where the entire construction industry is heading. It's digging into the nuts and bolts of a sector that's, well, kind of in crisis.
And the mission for our deep dive is pretty specific. We want to answer one core question. Why? Why is this massive, noisy, concrete-loving industry shifting from what they call traditional construction to sustainable construction?
And that's a key word.
It is. And I want to be clear here. I'm not talking about just, sticking a few solar panels on a roof and calling it a day.
No, and neither is the source material. This isn't about greenwashing.
Right. Because so often sustainable, it just feels like a marketing buzzword. But the promise I want to make to you listening is this. By the end of this, you're going to understand that sustainable construction is actually a necessary, almost desperate response to a really scary reality. We are literally running out of the stuff we used to build, and we're damaging the very ground we're building on, maybe to the point of no return.
That is the crux of it. It's not just ideology. It's practicality. It's economics.
Yep.
And if you look at James Rix's presentation, he breaks this down. He identifies 4 main pillars that are pushing this change.
Okay.
Environmental impact, limited resources, costs, and legislation.
The big 4. And while, costs and legislation are huge, today we're going to focus mainly on the first 2.
The physical ones.
Yeah, environmental impact and limited resources.
Yeah.
Because that's where the rubber meets the road, so to speak.
Or where the excavator meets the dirt.
So let's unpack this. The environment. That's the big one. When I look at these slides, there's this one photo that really sets the tone. It's dark, it's gritty, it's a construction site at dusk. It just looks dirty.
That image is a perfect representation of business as usual. That is traditional construction. And the presentation makes it very clear. Traditional construction is a major offender, a major one.
We're not talking small infractions here.
No, we're talking high levels of carbon emissions, massive amounts of waste, and just significant pollution.
Okay, let's dig into the carbon part first. Because when we talk about carbon footprints, we think about cars or planes.
Maybe cows?
Yeah, maybe cows. You don't necessarily look at a skyscraper and think, that's a pollution machine. So is it the building itself, or is it the process of building it?
That is such a critical distinction. In the industry, they separate this into 2 buckets. You've got operational carbon.
Okay, so that's the energy to keep the lights on, the heat and AC running after it's all done.
Exactly. But the big villain in traditional construction, and the one Rix focuses on, is embodied carbon.
Embodied carbon. So the energy it took just to make the building exist in the first place.
Precisely. I mean, think about the skeleton of a modern building. It's mostly concrete and steel.
Right.
To make cement, which is the glue in concrete, you have to heat limestone in a kiln to about, 1,400 degrees Celsius?
1,400 degrees? That's hotter than a volcano.
It's incredible heat.
Yeah.
And you usually burn fossil fuels to get that heat. But here's the kicker. The chemistry itself releases CO2.
What do you mean?
When the limestone breaks down in the heat, it lets off carbon dioxide as a chemical byproduct. So even if you powered the whole factory with solar energy, the rock itself is still releasing carbon as it cooks.
That is wild. So concrete it's basically baked pollution?
In a traditional sense, yes. And then you add steel, which takes massive energy to smelt. And then you have to transport all these incredibly heavy materials. The source notes that the goal of sustainable approaches is to minimize these impacts. It's damage control on a global scale.
Okay, so if traditional building is this carbon-heavy monster, what's the alternative? What's the playbook here?
Well, he does outline specific tactics. First, using low-carbon materials.
Which means using wood instead of steel.
Often, yeah. We're seeing a big resurgence of timber-engineered timber that's incredibly strong, but it actually stores carbon. Or using concrete mixes that replace some of that cement with industrial byproducts like fly ash.
Huh.
But the other big tactic is reducing waste through better design.
Better design sounds a bit vague. What does that actually mean for the guy pouring the foundation?
No, it's actually really practical. Think of it like buying fabric for a suit. If you buy a bolt of fabric that's, say, 3 yards wide, but your pattern pieces are all arranged inefficiently, you end up throwing away 40% of the cloth as scraps.
And you paid for those scraps?
Exactly.
Yeah.
In construction, we do this constantly. We design a room that's just off the standard size of a sheet of plywood, so the builders have to cut a foot off every single piece and toss it in a skip.
Oh.
So Rix argues for designing to standard dimensions. You design the building to fit the materials, not the other way around.
That makes so much sense. It's just efficiency.
And then there's the operational side. The source mentions improving energy efficiency explicitly. So designing structures that need less energy to heat and cool in the first place.
Right, because once a building is up, it sits there for 50, 100 years. If it's drafty or if the sun just boils it every afternoon,
Yeah.
you're burning energy constantly just to make it livable.
It's exactly. So sustainable construction means improving insulation making, the building a thermos, essentially, or orienting the windows so you get natural light, but not that scorching heat. It's about thinking about the building's whole life, not just the ribbon-cutting day.
So we've got the air covered, carbon emissions, energy. That feels like the global warming part of this. But looking at the source, there's another layer to this environmental impact that feels a lot more local.
Yes. This is where we move from the atmosphere down to the soil. The presentation highlights a key driver, the protection of ecosystems and biodiversity.
Which I think gets overlooked. We talk about the environment as this big abstract thing, but construction, it happens somewhere. It happens in a neighborhood, in a forest, next to a river.
And construction it's violent. Physically, you are tearing up the earth. The source details how construction activities hurt the local environment. It mentions disrupting natural habitats, contaminating water sources.
And degrading soil quality. Let's talk about that for a second. Because to me, dirt is dirt. How do you degrade it?
Well, soil is actually a living system. It's full of bacteria, fungi, air pockets.
Yeah.
It acts like a sponge for water.
Okay.
But on a construction site, you strip off the topsoil, the living part. Then you drive 40-ton excavators over the subsoil. You compress it until it's as hard as concrete.
So it can't absorb water anymore?
Right, it becomes impermeable. So when it rains, the water just sheets off, picking up oil, cement dust, silt, and it all rushes into the nearest creek.
And I've seen that milky, muddy water coming off a site.
That's silt pollution. It chokes out fish, it blocks sunlight in the water, it destroys the ecosystem downstream. So when Rix talks about sustainable construction, he's talking about avoiding that.
So how do you avoid destroying the neighborhood? Are you out there with a magnifying glass moving beetles out of the way?
In a way, the source outlines solutions like responsible site selection.
Meaning
Maybe you don't build on the pristine wetlands. Maybe you build on a site that was already used for something else, a brownfield site.
recycling land? I like that.
Exactly. And careful planning. The text says the goal is to preserve natural features wherever possible. So instead of flattening the hill and cutting down the 100-year-old oak tree, you design the building around the tree. You use the hill.
That sounds so much nicer to live in, too. It's moving from a mindset of conquering the landscape to integrating with it.
It is. And the key takeaway, as the source puts it, is to limit land disturbance. You only touch what you absolutely have to. It's a stewardship mindset.
Okay, so we have the environmental pillar. We're trying to stop cooking the planet with carbon, and we're trying not to trash the local ecosystem. But remember that aha promise I made at the start.
I do.
I said this wasn't just about being green, it was about running out of stuff.
And this is where it gets really interesting and, frankly, a little alarming. This is the supply chain reality check.
Let's move to that second major pillar, limited resources. The source material lists what the industry relies on. Timber, metals, aggregates, fossil fuels.
Stop and think about those 4 things. That is literally what our modern world is made of.
It's everything.
Your house is timber and concrete aggregates. Your car is metal. The road is aggregates and fossil fuels.
Aggregates. That's just a fancy word for rocks and sand.
Essentially, yes.
Well,
Crushed stone, sand, gravel.
now this is where I get stuck. I can understand running out of oil, maybe even running out of trees, but running out of rock, running out of sand. The earth is a giant rock. How is that possible?
This is the sand crisis, and it
Yeah.
catches everyone off guard. See, we don't just need any sand. Desert sand grains are round from being blown around by the wind. They're like little marbles.
Okay.
You try to make concrete with them, they don't lock together. The concrete just crumbles.
So the Sahara Desert is useless for building.
Completely useless for concrete. We need sharp sand, the kind from riverbeds or the ocean floor. The grains are angular, so they lock together tight. But, and here's the conflict, global demand is skyrocketing. We're dredging rivers and seabeds faster than nature can replenish them.
We're stripping the riverbeds bare.
We are. And Rix notes the consequence is that these materials are becoming more difficult and expensive to extract. We've tapped the easy veins of metal. We've dredged the easy rivers. Now we have to go deeper, further into more sensitive areas.
Which brings us right back to the environmental damage we just talked about.
It's a vicious cycle. And this isn't just an environmental issue anymore, it's a supply chain issue. If you're a construction company and you can't get steel because the price has tripled, or you can't get sand, you go out of business. You can't build.
So sustainable construction isn't just saving the planet, it's saving the industry. It's self-preservation.
Precisely. If they don't change, they literally grind to a halt.
So what's the solution? If we're running out of new stuff, what do we do?
The source introduces a concept that's critical here, the circular economy.
Circles. I like circles, but usually we operate in a straight line, right?
Right. The traditional model is linear. Take, make, waste. You mine the rock, make the building, demolish it, throw it in a landfill. A straight line to the garbage dump.
Depressing and so wasteful.
A circular economy bends that line back on itself. The text points to specific practices, recycling materials and reusing components.
So when you tear down an old factory, you don't just crunch it all up.
Ideally, you don't tear it down at all. You deconstruct it. Rix implies a shift toward design for deconstruction. Imagine a building put together like a giant Lego set.
Okay, I like that. With Legos, you can take the castle apart and build a spaceship. The bricks are still good.
Exactly. But with traditional construction, we glue everything together. We pour concrete over steel. You can't get that steel back out without destroying it. Sustainable design uses bolts and screws, so you can actually take the beams out and reuse them in a new building.
That is profound. It turns the city itself into a kind of mine.
That's the concept of urban mining.
We don't need to dig up a mountain. We just mine the old buildings we aren't using anymore.
That's it. And the text also mentions selecting products with a lower environmental impact to begin with. If you can use recycled aluminum for your window frames, that's less bauxite ore you have to mine.
It sounds so logical. It makes you wonder why we haven't been doing this all along.
Because for a long time, new materials were cheap and extracting them was easy. We didn't have to care. Now the economics have shifted. Now we have to.
That really puts it in perspective. Wow. Okay, I want to shift gears for a second and talk about the visuals again, because James Rix, in his presentation, uses some really striking imagery.
The visual language is very telling, yeah.
We talked about that first image, the dark industrial construction site, but then later in the slides, there's this completely different vibe. It's this solar punk style concept art.
Yes. It's just stark contrast.
For anyone listening who hasn't seen this aesthetic, just picture a city, but it's lush. There are buildings covered in greenery, vertical gardens. There are wind turbines spinning gently in the background.
It looks like sci-fi,
Yeah.
but the good kind, not the dystopian kind.
Right. Not Blade Runner. More like, well, something bright and airy and clean.
And what's important is that the presentation puts these two images in the same deck. It's showing us here is where we are, the gritty, dirty site, and here is where we need to go.
That bright green future.
And that synthesis is the ultimate goal of everything we've discussed. We're trying to move from an industry of extraction and pollution, that dark photo, to one of integration and efficiency.
And crucially, that solar punk city isn't just about looking pretty. Those vertical gardens provide insulation. Those wind turbines provide power.
Exactly. The green aesthetic is actually functional. It's built on those boring, practical pillars we mentioned earlier. That solar punk city is built with recycled steel and low-carbon cement.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? Let's just recap. We've looked at the source, Unit 102.2.1, and we've seen that this shift is driven by three main things.
It's a three-pronged response, really. First, you have the carbon emissions crisis. We need to stop the industry contributing to climate change, especially that embodied carbon.
Second, biodiversity loss. We need to stop destroying the soil and the local habitats where we build.
And third, maybe most urgently for the businesses themselves, the scarcity of raw materials.
Yeah.
We are just running out of the easy-to-get sand, timber, and metals.
So the next time you're walking down the street and you hear that jackhammer, don't just be annoyed by the noise.
Take a look at the materials. Look at the steel, the concrete. Ask yourself, where did that come from? Was it dug out of a mountain, or is it recycled? And what was living on that plot of land before the diggers got there?
It really changes how you see the city. You start seeing the ghosts of the resources.
You do. And it raises a really important question for the future. We talked about how traditional materials are getting more expensive because they're harder to find.
Right, basic supply and demand.
So here's a provocative thought to leave you with. We often think of sustainable options as the expensive luxury choice, the organic food of the building world.
Yeah, strictly for the fancy tech campuses or eco-resorts.
Exactly. But if traditional raw materials keep getting scarcer and more expensive, we might reach a tipping point where that whole situation flips.
What do you mean?
I mean, is sustainable construction, using recycled materials, reusing old buildings, being super efficient, is it actually going to become the only way we can afford to build in the future?
That is a huge thought.
Maybe sustainability won't be a moral choice anymore. It'll just be the only option that doesn't bankrupt us.
So it's not, can we afford to be green, but can we afford not to be?
Exactly. In a resource-constrained world, being wasteful is a luxury we won't be able to pay for.
That is definitely something to chew on. James Rix's presentation might look like a simple college lecture, but it's pointing to a massive economic shift. Thank you so much for breaking this down with me today.
My pleasure. It's a heavy topic, but an essential one.
And thank you for listening to this deep dive. Keep looking up at those cranes, and we'll catch you next time.